Hello there, people of the internet. This is From the Fringe, and my name is Christopher. Today, I've got a very interesting video about doppelgangers, about tulpas, about spirit mimics. These are all fairly common in the paranormal lore, so to speak, but I find them fascinating, especially tulpas. I think this is a very interesting video. It is for me anyway, personally. Hopefully you guys agree. And so without further ado, shall we? It all begins when I was about 7 years old. When I was a young girl, I was playing with my friend in my house one afternoon. We were downstairs when I heard my sister calling my name from the upstairs bathroom. This struck me as strange, as I didn't think she was home. My friend also heard it, so we made our way upstairs. The voice continued to call us until we were at the top of the stairs, which is when I realized the bathroom light was off, and there was clearly no one in there. We were confused and looked around, convinced she was hiding. My sister came home hours later, as she had been out with her friend that day. I couldn't understand what had happened, and neither could my friend. We still talk about it to this day. Nearly 20 years later. In 2015, my partner and I moved to a new house to rent. It was an older house, but was decently priced and had great potential. As we couldn't afford the rent on our own, we had to advertise for a few flatmates, and before we knew it, we had filled the house with a decent group of people. My partner and I shared an ensuite bedroom, which was located on the top floor of the house. One day I was in the bedroom doing my makeup. I had left the bathroom door ajar, which led into our room, but I had our bedroom door shut tight, as I enjoyed the quiet. Suddenly, I heard our closet door in the bedroom open and a few loud footsteps against the carpet behind the open door. I figured this was my partner, who must have snuck into our room without me hearing the bedroom door open. "Hi," I called out, still focusing on myself in the mirror. His voice immediately answered back, "Hi." I remember smiling and asking, "What are you doing?" To which he replied, "Nothing." For some reason, the way he said it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I can still hear the exact tone in my head. The only way I can describe it is that he was being playful and mischievous, as if he was hiding something, perhaps the way a child would answer if they were up to no good. I called back out, "No, seriously, what are you doing?" And to that, the responses stopped. My question was met with silence. When I turned around and opened the bathroom door, I realized that no one had been in the room at all. The bedroom door was still closed, but the most peculiar thing, perhaps, was that the closet door was now wide open, something I know I did not do. It was definitely closed before I went into the bathroom. This startled me to my core, and I remember feeling almost sick, as I spook easily. A couple of months later, our flatmate Matt was home alone one day, making himself a cup of tea in the kitchen. He had the tea in one hand and his cell phone in the other, and was walking to the lounge when he said he heard my voice. I'm Canadian and have a distinct accent in our house. He heard me whispering behind him, "Hi, Matt," right behind him. He was so startled that he dropped his tea and his phone onto the ground and turned around to find no one. He swore that it was my exact voice, and even said he spent a good 20 minutes trying to find me in the house after thinking it must be some kind of a prank. It was enough to scare him out of the house for the rest of the day. Apparently this phenomenon is a lot more common than I expected. I've come across a lot of stories, and they're all very similar. There's a lot of stories about people hearing familiar voices calling them, and that sort of thing. Here's another example, just a short one. One morning while my mother was taking a shower, and my brother and I were at school, and my father was at work, she heard a frantic knocking on the bedroom door. She turned off the water and heard my voice screaming, "Julie, Julie," which is her name. Confused as to why I was suddenly home, and why on earth I would be calling her, my mother, by her first name, she angrily opened the door and looked out into an empty hallway. Nobody was there. Grabbing her bathrobe, she checked the entire house, but it was void of anyone else besides her. So every time I heard about these sort of reports, I always sort of put it down to some sort of spiritual infestation, some sort of ghost that's mimicking the people in the household to trickster sort of style or possibly malevolent. But as I looked into it a little bit more, I sort of started to shift in my opinion, and I do think there is ghostly mimicry, both trickster and, maybe less than savoury spirits within a household. But I think there's a lot of unconscious, maybe astral type projection. These things called tulpas or doppelgangers. Apparently these tulpas can be produced at will, but more often than not they're like a subconscious projection. Obviously a lot of this phenomenon could be just mistaken identity. You see someone who's wearing the same sort of clothes at a distance and you go, oh, there's my buddy Bob, and it's not Bob. The other sort of down-to-earth explanation is hallucinations, but a lot of these occurrences have multiple witnesses, so that rules out hallucination. As far as I know, I've never heard of a group hallucination. Could be wrong. I just want to share this with you. It's from the Unexplained Mysteries forum, and it's this post by a woman who claims to have had several encounters, I was going to say with, but this is rather as, a tulpa, meaning that her likeness has been projected into the lives of other people, and they've witnessed her when she wasn't actually present. It's pretty interesting. I'll try and summarize it for you, because as you can see, there's a bit of a wall of text here. Okay, so the first incident is your typical vocal mimicry. The first incident was when my daughter had her friend spend the night. I'd been doing construction all day and was exhausted. Of course, the girls insisted on staying up late and squealing. I was too tired to lift my head off my pillow or even utter a sound. I remember wishing with all my might that they would just shut up. Suddenly, they both came running into my room, alarmed and stammering. "What do you want?" "We heard you whistling your whistle louder than ever from the kitchen." I told them that I had not been whistling and that I'd been in bed wishing that they would just shut up. Also, as I read on, you'll notice that there's a common theme in that she's always exhausted or mentally drained or ill or something like that. She's not in her usual alert state. So in this second incident, she talks about how she had finished work. She went to pick up her daughter and her friend from school. On the way into the house, the two girls ran ahead into the kitchen because they were hungry. She was walking up behind the kids, and in her mind she was deciding whether she should go and feed the horses or go and have a shower first and then go and feed the horses. She decided that she was going to have a shower, so she followed the girls inside and went straight to the bedroom to get some fresh clothes. Then the phone started to ring, and the phone was in the kitchen, and so she yelled out, "Hey girls, can you answer that phone? I'm busy." They ignored her. She could hear the girls in the bathroom. She was only 20 feet away and it was through an open door. So she yelled again, louder, and the girls again ignored her. And then she popped her head around the corner and said, "Hey, how come you didn't answer that phone?" And the girls shat themselves, because what they had seen was, as they got into the kitchen, they saw the mother walking out into the field to feed the horses. And when she popped her head around the corner, they were stunned because they just saw her outside, and a second later she's inside staring at them. And so now we're starting to see entities and not just voices. This next one's interesting. It's I'll just read it first. The fourth incident was when my son was messing with goats and teasing them, an activity which I had forbidden him to do. He looked at a bush near our kitchen door, and I was there from the waist up, as he described, 10 times my usual size, and just looming over him and glaring. There's something about this one that I find really interesting, because it's like I'm going to start calling it a tulpa. It's like this tulpa of hers, this subconscious tulpa, has taken on the personality of the mother, in that, she's forbidden the kid to stop teasing the goats, or forbidden the kid from teasing the goats. And this tulpa has manifested as this giant stern warning to the kid not to do it. Let's get to this 8th one. The 8th incident was my tenants, which are man and wife, their adult son and girlfriend. They all saw me walking with someone else as clear as day up the main house just 50 feet away. The wife had something she wanted to tell me, so the others urged her to run up just before they left and tell me, to which she did. As she approached with her husband, second laters, apparently I simply vanished before their eyes. They thought that I'd just run off again, since their brains couldn't compute that kind of vanishing. Apparently I was with a man. They assured me that it was definitely me that they saw, because I have a very, she says that she has very unusual angular features, and she's very distinct looking in frame and form, so there was no mistaking her. But what's interesting is that there is another entity with her. And so in this particular case, I'm thinking, could this be a glimpse into an alternative timeline or an alternative universe, maybe? So a glimpse into an alternative universe might be an idea to sort of play with, something to think about. But I want to bring it back to Tulpas, because I remember when I first started getting into the paranormal, there was a book I read about this person called Alexandra David Neal. She had a particular experience with a willfully created tulpa. She'd been living with the Tibetans for a number of years, and she had heard all these stories about these doubles, these doppelgangers, these tulpas. And so she started experimenting with this stuff, and she had some success. But before I do, I just want to mention this story. It's a very short one. It's relevant to what I'm about to talk about. Here we go. Have a listen. My sister once woke up and saw my brother on the couch eating chocolate, looking demonic. The thing is that he was on the top bunk bed, and she could see his arm hanging down. So the one on the couch was something else. She adds here as a note that she could also hear the brother snoring to confirm that the brother was asleep above her and not on the couch. But the fact that it was an evil version of the brother, this is interesting. So let's bring it back to David Neal. So as I said, Alexandra David Neal she was living in Tibet, and she had a series of, let's call them magical maybe, paranormal perhaps is a better word. She had a few paranormal experiences with tulpas. Just a little quote on tulpas here. Quote, "Visualizing mental formations, either voluntarily or not, is a most mysterious process. What becomes of these creations? May it not be that, like children born of our flesh, these children of our mind separate their lives from ours, escape our control, and play parts of their own?" Alexandra David Neal shares with us 3 well-known stories from the region involving tulpas. A young Tibetan who was in my service went to see his family. I had granted him 3 weeks' leave, after which he was to purchase a food supply, engage porters to carry the loads across the hills, and come back here with the caravan. Most likely the fellow had had a good time with his people, because 2 months had elapsed, and still he had not returned. I thought he had definitely left me. Then I saw him one night in a dream. He arrived at my place clad in a somewhat unusual fashion, wearing a sun hat of foreign shape. He had never worn such a hat. The next morning, one of my servants came to me in haste. "Wang Du has come back," he told me. "I have just seen him down the hill." The coincidence was strange. I went out of my room to look at the traveller. The place where I stood dominated a valley. I distinctly saw Wang Du. He was dressed exactly as I had seen him in my dream. He was alone and walking slowly up the path that wound up the hill slope. I remarked that he had no luggage with him, and the servant who was next to me answered, "Wang Du has walked ahead. The load carriers must be following." We both continued to observe the man. He reached a small chorten, walked behind it, and did not reappear. The base of this chorten was a cube built in stone, less than 3 feet high, and from its needle-shaped top to the ground, the small monument was no more than 7 feet high. Moreover, the chorten was completely isolated. There were neither houses, nor trees, nor undulations, nor anything that could provide a hiding place in the vicinity. My servant and I believed that Wang Du was resting for a while under the shade of the chorten, but as time went by without his reappearing, I inspected the ground around the monument with my field glasses, but discovered nobody. Very much puzzled, I sent 2 of my servants to search for the boy. I followed their movements with the glasses, but no trace was to be found of Wang Du, nor of anybody else. That same day, a little before dusk, the young man Wang Du appeared in the valley with his caravan. He wore the very same dress and the foreign sun hat which I had seen in my dream. The painter. A Tibetan painter, a fervent worshipper of the wrathful deities, who took particular delight in drawing their terrible forms, came one afternoon to pay me a visit. I noticed behind him the somewhat nebulous shape of one of the fantastic beings which often appeared in his paintings. I made a startled gesture, and the astonished artist took a few steps towards me, asking me what the matter was. I noticed that the phantom did not follow him, and quickly thrusting my visitor aside, I walked to the apparition with one arm stretched in front of me. My hand reached the foggy form. I felt as if touching a soft object whose substance gave way under the slight push, and then the vision vanished. The painter confessed, in answer to my questions, that he had been performing a dub-tub rite during the last few weeks, calling on the deity whose form I had dimly perceived, and that very day he had worked the whole morning on a painting of the same deity. In fact, the Tibetan's thoughts were entirely concentrated on the deity, whose help he wished to secure for a rather mischievous undertaking. And it just says here that the dub-tub, whose pronunciation no doubt I have butchered, is a magical rite of invocation or conjuration, and it can have beneficial or harmful purposes. And finally, we get to Alexandra David Neal's personal experience with creating a tulpa. And this will relate back to the evil brother eating chocolate that I mentioned before we got into this webpage here. Okay, so just cutting to the chase a little bit here. She says, I chose for my experiment a most insignificant character, a monk, short and fat, of an innocent and jolly type. I shut myself in Psalms in this thing and proceeded to perform the prescribed concentration of thought and other rites. After a few months, the phantom monk was formed. His form grew gradually fixed and lifelike looking. He became a kind of guest, living in my apartment. I then broke my seclusion and started for a tour with my servants and tents. The monk included himself in the party. Though I lived in the open, riding on horseback for miles each day, the illusion persisted. Now and then it was not necessary for me to think of him to make him appear, so he's starting to take on a life of his own. The phantom performed various actions of the kind that are natural to travellers, and that I had not commanded. For instance, he walked, stopped, looked around him. The illusion was mostly visual, but sometimes I felt as if a robe was lightly rubbing against me, and once a hand seemed to touch my shoulder. His form starting to become solid. The features which I had imagined when building my phantom gradually underwent a change. The fat, chubby-cheeked fellow grew leaner. His face assumed a vaguely mocking, sly, malignant look. He became more troublesome and bold. In brief, he escaped my control. Once, a herdsman who brought me a present of butter saw the tulpa in my tent and took it for a live llama. I ought to have let the phenomenon follow its course, but the presence of that unwanted companion began to prove trying to my nerves. It turned into a day nightmare. So, I decided to dissolve the phantom. I succeeded, but only after 6 months of hard struggle. My mind creature was tenacious of life. So the Tibetans themselves disagree on what this phenomenon is. Some of them think it's an actual physical materialization. Others think it's an apparition. Others still think it's just mental suggestion. Hey, it's me from the future. You guys who watched my last video will probably recognize this fuzzy face. Somehow I have deleted a few of my files, and I've luckily right at the end, the last couple of recordings that I did. So I'm just doing a bit of a fill-in here a few days later. I can't remember what I was talking about exactly here in this video, but I was droning on a little bit, and so I think it's a good time to end the video right now. And so I bid you farewell, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for getting here. You did well to get this far in the video, to get right to the end. See you later.